Welcome to another episode of the Preparing for Pregnancy After Loss podcast. This is your host, Natalie Facey, and it is such a pleasure and a treat to be here with you once again. In this episode, I chat with Tasha of Tasha's Tea. So you might remember Tasha, we had an interview a couple of episodes ago where she shared her pregnancy loss experience and her experience moving through fertility and what healing has looked like for her. And this time around, she had an opportunity to interview me. So I realized that our conversation, a lot came out about my pregnancy journey, a lot came out about why I do the work that I do. And so it's a really great share. It's a really great conversation to share with you so that you know more about who I am, what brought me to where I am right now, and why I love doing the work that I do. Ooh, and there's one more thing I wanted to point out about the recording. So for some reason, there was either some lag in the internet connection, or perhaps not a lag, but there was some miscoordinating with the audio on both of our ends, so that it sounded as though we were talking on top of each other. It sounded as though one person was responding even before the question was fully out. So that was just an audio, tech issue. I think it had to do with the internet connection, and that only happens in, maybe about 2% of the conversation. But everything else is solid. So just wanted to point that out as you're listening to that, in case you noticed that as well. All right. Without further ado, here is the interview.
Thank you so much for
My
joining me tonight.
pleasure.
And I just want to say too, thank you for having me on your podcast. You really gave me an opportunity to share my story and just be
Aw.
transparent. And I really
Yeah,
appreciate that.
yeah.
Thank you.
It was real. It was a real podcast, like real
Yeah. And I mean,
conversation.
we could have went on and on and on.
Yeah.
Like I feel like, dang, I had more to say.
Yeah.
Like we could have went on and on. And you just gave me that free space to just
Aw.
talk. You
Yeah.
know.
I
So thank
love how
you.
authentic you were, and I'm glad that you felt that that space was there so that we could go there, because like those things need to be said, like the beauty and also the pain.
Yeah.
So I'm grateful that you found that
Yeah.
space a safe one to do so.
Well, thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you. Well, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce
Yeah,
yourself.
so for those of you who don't know me, my name is Natalie Facey. On Instagram, I am the Birth Warrior. So I'm the founder of coaching. Hey, Sean. I am the founder of coaching for Birth Warriors. And essentially, where Birth Warriors comes from is that through the birthing experience, there are challenges, right? It isn't as easy for everyone as the
Hmm.
image that we're typically shown. And where the warrior comes in is deciding that no matter what I go through, no matter how it feels as though this experience has broken me, I'm not going to stay broken. I am going to have the life that I
Hmm.
want to have. And I love making the distinction between, like the goal that I work towards when I work with clients. It isn't just to have
Uh-huh.
a baby, like having a baby isn't the success, even though that's beautiful and that's what we all want.
Yeah.
But the goal is their healing.
Hmm.
Because if you have a baby and you're
Hmm.
wounded and it's hard for you to show up as a parent or as a partner, then something is missing, right? And
Hmm.
so what I support people with is their emotional healing. So I'm a coach. I'm trained as a coach in the Love Yourself, Heal Your Life philosophy of Louise Hay. And she has written You Can Heal Your Life, if anyone is familiar with that. She's also the founder of Hay House, which is
Hmm.
like the place for most of the books like spiritual and metaphysics and in that world.
Hmm.
And so I was really drawn to her work about, when we can love ourselves, the healing that comes from that place. And so I incorporate that in my work with my
Yeah.
clients. So I offer coaching, I offer
Hmm.
emotional healing, which is understanding what are the emotions that we're still holding, right? And the emotions are held in the body. That's where we store them, right? When we haven't cleared them, when we don't know what to do with them. So I support people in identifying where in their body those emotions are being held and releasing them. I'm also a birth doula because working with people who are trying to become pregnant or pregnant, I wanted to understand the full process. Hey, Mariana. And so I get to offer birth doula support as part of my work. And I'm an angel mom, which is one of the reasons why we're here, right? So I've gone through my own loss. I've lost two babies. Yeah.
Tell us about that. Tell us about your journey, because
Yeah.
I read a little bit on your website, but I want to hear from you exactly.
Yeah. So my first pregnancy was in 2015. I was working in the advertising industry, got married like a couple of months before. Um, and yeah, felt ready to start our family. Actually, I was probably with my husband for, yeah, we were together for 7 years before we got married. So by the time we got married, we knew that we were ready to start a family and became pregnant. Pregnancy was fine. Like in your first pregnancy, you don't think of anything going wrong because, like, why would you, right? If no one has
Just
ever
because you're so
told you that
happy.
there was anything in, out of balance in your body, you would never think that the pregnancy would go wrong. So that
Yeah.
pregnancy went to the second trimester. So I was 17 weeks. And I was at work one Friday and noticed spotting and started freaking out. Googled, why would I be spotting while I'm pregnant? Saw that I could potentially be having a
Right.
miscarriage and went to the hospital. So that loss was like traumatic because it was unexpected. You don't plan for
Yeah.
it. I always remember it as like a hurricane just ripping through my body and taking the baby because it felt so quick and so devastating, right? So it's like you're creating this safe place and you put the flowers over there in the vase and you spread the bed, like you're creating this internal home in your body, and then something just like rips that away. And so that was in 2016, in March 2016, when I had that loss. They couldn't tell what was wrong, right? They didn't see any signs of anything being out of balance in my body. But the only thing that they saw was that my cervix was opening before time. Essentially, I was going into preterm labor, right? So that
Okay.
was difficult. But moved through that. And in moving through that, one of the things that I identified that was out of balance in my life was the job that I had, because my job was really, really stressful. The advertising industry is stressful and demanding, and I was just working a lot, staying at work late, not always eating on time. And so in the hospital, as I was like, in the delivery room losing this baby, I was thinking there's no way that I'm going back to that job, because if losing her is impacting me so deeply, then it means that my life is also as precious, right? And so why wouldn't I value my life in the same way? And so coming back
Right.
from the hospital, so I went in on a Friday. We were heading back home on a Sunday, and I stopped by my office, emptied my locker, like got rid of everything. Was like, I'm not coming back here.
You said, like
I
you
was like,
just
I'm done.
like, see you sis, you done. I'm out. Deuces.
And of course, 6 weeks I was back because, you have to pay the bills. So
Right.
I was like, okay, maybe I'll transition out. That's smarter, right? And so I went back to work, but with a different energy. Like I wasn't finding
Yeah.
joy in what I was doing. Like it was stressful, but I still liked it, right?
Yeah.
I love the strategy and coming up with ideas.
Yeah.
And that just wasn't there anymore.
It wasn't there anymore. You
I
lost the
lost the
love for
love,
it.
right? Because something just so big occurred that, that just didn't feel important anymore. Like life, like I knew that my life needed more meaning. right? That was it. My life needed more meaning.
Like there's more to life than just working and killing
Exactly. And it
yourself.
was
Yeah.
through that loss that I saw that, because prior to that happening, maybe about a good year, year and a half, I knew that I had done my time, but I didn't have the courage to leave because I didn't know what else to do, right? And I didn't know if
That's what a lot of us
exactly,
do.
right? So we
Yeah.
think about the security, the money, the fact that we know what we're doing in our current jobs, and there's fear around trying something new.
Yeah.
But after the loss, I was just like, nope, life is too important. Like, I have to live a life that's more authentic, right? And so I moved to another company, which was a nonprofit company. And what I loved about that company is that they were doing good work. So that's one. But two, maybe 60% of my job was coaching and working directly with people and helping to improve their lives and improve what they were doing in their career. And so I got a lot of fulfillment out of that. And I decided to
Okay.
wait a while before trying again. Like, I wanted to, just like fully have my feet in the
How long did
door.
you wait?
Maybe about a year and a
Yeah.
half. So the next time we tried was in 2018. So after that loss in 2016, we tried again in, I think, 2017 or in 2017. So that pregnancy was now considered high risk. So I was seeing high risk
Yeah.
doctors. They were monitoring me weekly. It felt like oh my gosh, I was going in for the freaking progesterone shots on alternate butt cheeks every week. Now I'm like, I should have just taken the shots home, because that would have been so much easier, but I didn't trust myself to inject myself. And so
Me neither. I
and
can't
so
do that. I can't.
on my way to work,
Mm.
I was, stopping by the clinic and getting these shots in my butt cheek to make sure that I had enough progesterone to sustain the pregnancy. And I know that for whoever listening who's had a challenging pregnancy journey, like, you just decide that whatever it takes, you're going to do it. And so
Yeah, I don't even, yeah, you don't ask questions. You just like, whatever they say, I'm
you
just going to do it.
sacrifice a lot, right? You sacrifice a lot.
Yeah,
And throughout that entire pregnancy, I was experiencing anxiety the entire pregnancy. And
me too.
it
Yeah.
never,
I was so worried.
right, just like, anything can happen at any point, right? Because if you don't know what went wrong in the first pregnancy, you don't really know what to solve for in the second,
What to
right?
expect.
So
Yeah. So you're like on
all the
eggshells.
time, like you're walking on eggshells. Yeah. So they eventually noticed that my cervix was shortening again, so as though my body was now preparing to release the pregnancy. And so they did a cerclage, which is like lengthening. It's like length. So let's say that this is the cervix between the uterus up here and like the opening of the vagina.
Yeah.
So my cervix was becoming smaller
Yeah.
and smaller. So what they did was lengthen it, which was painful, and then they tied it to keep it closed. It
You had to do that
Yeah, it's
surgically?
a procedure. They basically go in there and do their thing. It was not comfortable, and I was in pain for several days after. But again, it's one of the things that you do to just make sure that the pregnancy is safe, right?
Yeah.
However, what they eventually saw was that my body was still going into preterm labor. And so they eventually had to remove the cerclage so that I could give birth, whenever that
Right.
time came. But I just remember being really stressed in my pregnancy, and I don't even think I ever acknowledged it as stress. I don't think I ever thought, oh, I'm stressed out or I'm experiencing anxiety, because it's sort of the thing that happens under the surface, like internally, and you don't name it,
Yeah.
right? And
So,
I felt really
yeah.
alone. Like, my husband is incredibly supportive, just like the sweetest person I could be with, but I felt as though there was so much happening inside that I didn't think that he would fully understand. Right?
Yeah. I can
My
understand that.
friends, my family members, like, as loving and as supportive as they were, like, I didn't feel like they could get what I was really going through, just like the
Yeah.
terror every single day, right? Every day waking up
Yes.
still being pregnant, like, oh my gosh, I'm still pregnant.
Yes. And like you feel like a twinge in your stomach and you're like, I'm like
Yeah.
Googling. I'm calling, what does this mean? Like every pain you feel, you just assume the
Yeah,
worst.
yeah, yeah. So, um, eventually it was clear that my body was preparing for birth because I was starting to have contractions. So they had me on bed rest in
Mm-hmm.
the hospital for what feels like a good week and a half or like, 10 days. And then the baby was just ready to
Mm-hmm.
come, like no matter. They also had me on
Really?
magnesium, which helps to reduce the contractions because it really, really just like softens your muscles. And that still didn't work
Mm-hmm.
because this little boy was ready to come. And so
Mm-hmm.
my baby, whose name is Mateo, which means gift from God,
Mm-hmm.
he was born on February 14th, 2018. And
How far
I
along were
was,
you?
yeah, that's a interesting part of my story. I was 23 weeks and 5 days. And in New York City, if the pregnancy is less than 24 weeks, you actually have the option of terminating. But we weren't going to do that because we already lost the pregnancy. So we were
Right.
going to take any chance that we had with this one. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, it was like the walk of faith all the time, not knowing what would happen, not knowing what the outcome would be, and just
Mm-hmm.
trusting and hoping that everything would work out
Mm-hmm.
well. So because he was so premature, he had to be in the NICU. He was in the NICU. As I'm saying that, I'm remembering how difficult that was for me as someone who just gave birth because it felt as though so being in a room without him, with him being in the NICU somewhere else, it felt as though someone took a body part, almost as though someone like
Yeah.
severed an arm or a leg. Like that's how present it
Oh,
was, and
no.
that's how absent it was afterwards, not having him here. So I felt like I was missing a part of my body. And
Mm-hmm.
I was eventually able to see him once the meds that I was on weared off. And it was just so hard, like not being able to hold him and not being able to touch him and connect with him. It was just really, really difficult. And so he
Mm-hmm.
was in the NICU for what was going to be the unforeseeable future, just until, his organs were fully developed and he was able to breathe on his own. And every single day
Right.
in the NICU, it's I can hardly find the words to describe it. It feels sort of like you're going into battle and it's uncertain all the time because you just don't know what will happen, right? You're hearing these signs are
Mm-hmm.
good, he's improving in this way, but this is terrible, and yada yada yada, and like having meetings with all of the
Emotions.
doctors. It was just this continuous roller coaster, and I kept wanting to
Yeah.
hear some positive news, right? Just something that it's
Mm-hmm.
going to work out, it's going to be okay. And there was, like, firstly, doctors aren't going to give you false hope if they believe that it's actually false hope that they're giving
Yeah.
you. And so we just never got that. And every
Mm-hmm.
single day was difficult. And I was pumping in between all of that and trying to keep the schedule, which means that at 4 in the morning or 1 in the morning, I was like setting alarms every four, it was probably 4 hours or 3 hours to like get up and keep that schedule because it was the one thing that I
Mm-hmm.
could still hold on to, right? Like if Mateo comes
Mm-hmm.
home, I have my milk supply and, I could hold on to that as something that I could gift to him, right? So
Right.
we were in the NICU for like 6 weeks, almost 6 weeks. And I remember one night going to bed. We eventually started sleeping in the hospital because we were learning that things were becoming more and more uncertain. And we lived like an hour or an hour and a half away from the hospital and didn't want to get the phone call that
Mm-hmm.
something happened and we weren't there
You weren't
exactly.
there.
So we started sleeping
Mm-hmm.
in the hospital. Like they have a family room where you pull out the chairs and there's like literally another stranger beside you. Obviously, all of this is like pre what's happening now. So, people could be close, but
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was wartime. Like, who cares who's sleeping beside me? Like, I need to
Yeah.
sleep because my baby's
Yeah.
in that room,
I just want to be with my baby.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so on this particular night, when as I was going to bed, something came to me, and these were the words. It's like, you think the story is about you, but it isn't about you. This story is about Mateo. Like, he is the main character and he gets to choose whether or not he stays. Like, this is his journey. And even though all of us are a part of the journey, like, we're sort of like in the supporting role, right? We're the support cast, and this is his journey. And I knew that that was important. And so I wrote it down in my journal, went to bed. And when I woke up in the morning, it was all sorts of things happening. Like his, his levels were up and down, just like all sorts of things that weren't happening the day before. And that's the day that he made his transition. So his levels were dropping, they were inconsistent. They eventually had to do resuscitation, and we eventually had to let him go. So he died between my arms and his father's arms. And it was a really painful journey. Like, really, like, I remember as they were doing the resuscitation, I basically wanted to strip naked. My body was overheating, like I was taking off layers. And I had been pumping, which I think is just, a symbol of how dedicated I was to having this baby come home, right? Like, I was literally pumping as this baby was about to make his transition. So I was walking around in the room and bending down, just like so much energy in my body. I wanted to scream because that's the worst thing that you can face as a parent, like losing your child. So that was the journey, right? And I had already been a coach before my first loss. And even before being a coach, from I was like 8 years old, I knew that the work that I was going to do would involve healing work. I knew that it would involve healing.
So you always
I knew it
do.
would involve teaching and speaking. Like, it's sort of like when something is in your blueprint and you just know that that's who you are.
Yeah.
And so,
It's like it's your calling.
exactly. And so what essentially happened was that the experience that I went through, as people would say, something becomes your ministry. So that experience
Yes.
became the thing that I support people in, because like that is what I went through.
You went through.
And
Yeah.
so obviously did my healing, got the support that I needed. I learned about a practice called Semantic Therapy, which is the understanding. So soma comes from the Greek word which means body. And it's the understanding that everything that we've gone through, there is an imprint that's left in the body, right? Every single experience that we've gone through in this physical body, there's a record of it held in the body. And so this healing modality involved having a practitioner make gentle contact with the body. So it can be the shoulders or the hips and other parts of the body, and having you tune into, so from feeling that touch, you're able to bring in greater awareness into the body. And it's tuning into, what's my body holding? Is it tightness? Is it tension? Sometimes it's on another level. It can be imagery and memories and colors and shapes, because, the body speaks in these different ways. And through that modality, I was learning that I was like healing a lot of stuff, right? Like, there were things coming up from childhood. There were things coming up at work that was annoying me. Like, I was able to let go of a lot of stuff. And so I knew that if I only did coaching, which was the talking piece, then I would be doing my clients a disservice. Like, I would be doing like a part of it, but not all of the healing. And
But
so
not
I
the full.
decided that I wanted to be trained in somatic therapy to have people connect with their bodies, what they're holding, and experience this deeper level of healing. And so that's a part of the work that I offer to my clients. And emotional healing is essentially an expression of that. It's understanding that your gut, when there's imbalance in your gut, it's probably linked to some emotions that haven't been resolved, right? The gut is where we digest food, but it's also where we digest or process experiences, right? So notice how when you
Yeah.
become nervous, how it's like butterflies in your stomach, your body's always
Stomach.
responding to the experiences that you're going through, right? Like, if you become angry, your heart beats faster, your blood pumps harder, you're preparing to attack or defend yourself, your body's always responding, right? So it's creating this really safe environment so that you can tune into what's the imprint or the memory, like what's your body holding, Because in the busy lives that we
Mm-hmm.
have today, there is so little space and time to just sit with your body, to just be still, to just pay attention.
Because everybody's always like, go, go, go,
Especially in New
go,
York, like
go,
you've
all the
lived in New York, you know how it goes.
time. Yeah, yeah. Everything is just go, 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 go.
Exactly.
But like that's how people are today. It's like you get up, you go to work, you come home, you
Mm-hmm.
cook, you go home. You know, it's like nobody takes the time to just
Yeah.
relax. It's always just a constant go,
And
go,
it's
go, go,
hurting
go.
us. It's creating so much
Mm-hmm.
imbalance in our bodies, and that isn't the only thing that creates imbalance. So I don't want to say like, de-stress or whatever, do yoga and you'll be fine,
Yeah.
because there are other things in our environment and food and even past trauma from our parents that's a part of our makeup that impacts our
Yeah.
body and fertility and our ability to be present and how we show
Mm-hmm.
up at work, just like all of our lives. And so the work that I do with my client is I support them along the entire pregnancy journey. So if they're healing from a loss or healing from a fertility
Mm-hmm.
diagnosis, if they've had a past traumatic
Okay.
birth and they have fears around becoming pregnant again or fears around giving birth again, I support them with that. If and when they
Okay.
become pregnant, as you know as well, there's a lot of fear and anxiety, and so I support them in that process as well. And just
Mm-hmm.
having someone there where they can be their authentic self and cry or vent
Yeah.
or whatever, then that alone is
Mm-hmm.
healing and balancing, right? And then from there, it's
Mm-hmm.
having someone who knows the different healing modalities that can support them. And then the doula
Okay.
work comes in whenever someone becomes pregnant, and being able to share resources with them and tips and, different ways that they
Mm.
can prepare for childbirth.
So I always like, okay, this is how I always envisioned a birth
Mm-hmm.
doula. I know it's probably totally wrong, but like I always thought a birth doula was like when a woman is doing like the water
Mm-hmm.
birth and then the person that helps them deliver the baby. Like I always thought that was what a birth doula
Yeah.
is. So like what is a birth doula exactly?
Yeah.
Like what do you
Yeah,
do?
that is an excellent question. And I think that's usually the association with birth doulas, that
Yeah, like I
it's a home birth, it's a
yeah,
water birth, it's a natural birth. It's
yes,
for the people who are
yes,
like,
yes.
totally woo woo and natural.
Like dang,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
And
yeah,
doulas are
yeah.
even seen as like a form of luxury. Like you have a doula because you can afford it, right? And that isn't the case. So doulas or birth doulas
Mhm.
are support partners as you're giving birth, and they connect with you before you're giving birth, right? And so someone who's pregnant can
Okay.
hire a doula at any point in their pregnancy. Like you can
Okay.
literally have a positive test and and hire a doula, so at any point in
Mhm.
the pregnancy.
Okay.
Usually what the doula packages look like is that there are probably 2 to 3 prenatal visits, which means that they meet with you before you give birth. They're with you throughout your entire
Mhm.
labor until you give birth. And
Okay.
then if your
Okay.
doula offers postpartum service, or you can, hire another doula that does postpartum, then they're
Mhm.
there with you as you're in the postpartum period. So they might
Mhm.
support you with, lactation and helping you with things around the house, like doing laundry or holding the baby so that you can sleep. So it's really the
Ooh.
person who is by your side, your side and your partner's side, as you're going through this life-changing process, right?
Mhm. Okay. See, yeah, see, I didn't know that. I thought it was like they're there for like the
Yeah,
birth.
no,
That's it.
there's
You know what I mean? Like
education.
I didn't
Yeah,
understand that it was like throughout. So it's more like it's like basically having that emotional
exactly.
support, but you're physically there with them throughout the
Yes,
whole
yes. It's
process.
the emotional support.
Ah.
They also provide advocacy because, doulas are experts in the birthing process, which means that they are aware of
Mhm.
the different options that you have. So if you're in the hospital
Mhm.
and the medical team presents an option, a doula can remind you that
Uh-huh.
there are also other options that achieve the same goal, right? Because in the medical
Mm,
setting, things are so busy and they're managing so many other
yes.
humans that they might not have, they definitely don't have the time to have the
Yeah.
sort of attention that a doula provides. Like a doula is there with you all the time. A nurse is in and out of the room, and a doctor comes when it's time to catch the
Mm-hmm.
baby or if there's some sign that something is wrong, right? And so your
Mm-hmm.
doula, even before getting into the hospital, your doula provides education. Your doula supports you in creating your birth plan or birth guide. You know, like what are your desires for this birth? And if you want a natural birth, why is that
Mm-hmm.
something that's important to you? If you want an elective C-section, why is that something that's important to you? So it's helping you to understand what options you have, what the pros and cons are of those options. So you're always making an informed decision. You also go
Okay.
over different positions for birth to help to, relieve pain and to help the baby to descend. So it's preparing you for this
Mm-hmm.
experience, and it's being there with you so that you don't have to feel afraid or alone. It's helping your partner to know how they can support you. And, there is
Mm-hmm.
definitely evidence that with doulas, there's a lower rate of C-section,
Mm-hmm.
there's a lower rate of maternal
Mm-hmm.
mortality and fetal mortality. And a part of it is having that support in the room so that the outcomes are better. Hmm.
Wow, I did not know
Yeah.
that. I didn't know that. So, like, okay, so let's take somebody like me, for
Hmm.
example. I want you to coach me. I'm working towards getting
Hmm.
pregnant. How does that, what would my coaching sessions look like before I get
Yeah.
pregnant? Like, what do you help me with before
Yeah,
the
that is such a
pregnancy?
good question. So I look at you as a whole person, meaning we're not just
Mm-hmm.
talking fertility, we're talking everything that's happening in your life. So I want to
Okay.
know what's happening in your work life, in your relationship. And I don't go in with like targeted questions. I allow you to come with what's
Mhm.
present for you, right? So if you come on and you're like, oh
Okay.
my gosh, sorry I'm late for this appointment. Work was like crazy today, then I know that there's stress going on at work, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're sharing a
Mm-hmm.
disagreement between you and your partner, I know that there's some, difference in opinion or some, something that isn't meeting at this, you're not meeting at the same
Right.
place, right? So all of those things can
Mm-hmm.
impact your pregnancy because they impact your body's ability to feel safe, to one, just conceive,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because the
Yeah.
body has to give its permission, right? So
Mm-hmm. You have to be
exactly,
relaxed.
exactly. So
Yeah.
if the body is fighting off stressors, it means that the body may not have the
Mm-hmm.
resources to actually hold a pregnancy. Think of yourself like in
Okay.
outer space and like your ship is like putting off the signal that something is wrong, right? So you're going to use all of the
Mm-hmm.
resources that you have to be back in balance. And so it means that you are not in a position to take on um other guests. Like you can't just have people come
Yeah.
aboard. Like all of your resources have to go to like you taking care of yourself. And so the body operates in the same
Yeah.
way. So if the body is fighting off threats and fighting off toxins and all of these things that we're exposed to, it means that it needs to be in a place
Mm-hmm.
of balance before it's fully ready for conception, fully ready for pregnancy. And some
Mm-hmm.
people still do become pregnant, but it means that they could potentially
Mm-hmm.
have challenges because the resources in the body are now strained, right? So
Mm.
yeah. Yeah.
Go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
was saying that I don't do anything medical, but I think of myself as,
Okay.
a part of a birthing person's or a person's support team as they're on the birthing journey because I'm able to help you
Mm-hmm.
to identify where there are stressors and even where there are
Trigger.
beliefs around pregnancy and
Mm-hmm.
parenting that don't serve you, right? Like a lot of us hold,
Mm-hmm.
firstly, like trauma is passed on from the birthing person to the baby, right? And what happens
Yeah.
is that when we become pregnant, there is something that fear is
Mm-hmm.
activated within us, right? So that we start
Mm-hmm.
tapping into the fears that our mothers or our parents had because like the
Yeah.
environment is right for that, the environment has given birth to that. And so it's identifying
Mm-hmm.
what's present with me now as I'm thinking of starting a family, and how can I start to release those
Mm-hmm.
things so that they don't complicate my pregnancy, they don't complicate childbirth, and I don't, if there were imbalances in how I saw my parents take care of me, like I don't bring those same things into, you know, being a parent myself.
Okay.
I would say
Mm-hmm.
overall, a big part of what I do is just helping people to manage stress. So we sometimes go to like the deeper work, but sometimes what's on the surface is like, I'm anxious, I'm stressed, like let's work through that.
Kind of like
Hmm.
therapy in a way.
Yeah.
Okay. So how do you work with like do you work with like I know you live in
Hmm.
New York. So do you have a lot of clients that are like out of state? Like how do you help
Hmm.
them? Like you know how sometimes people like me, I personally go to
Hmm.
therapy. So I like
Hmm.
going, sitting on the
Hmm.
couch, being face to face
Hmm.
with her. So ever since COVID, now it's all virtual and I'm like, I don't like this. Like I want to sit on the couch and
Yeah.
relax and like let it out.
Yeah.
So how do you like have you worked with people that are like out of
Hmm.
state? Like how do you do that virtually? How does
Yeah.
that work?
Most of my people are out of state. I think all of my people now are
Really?
out of
Okay.
state, and almost, you know,
Okay.
except for doula clients, all of this has been virtual. I have people, you know, in
Virtual.
other countries, in other states. I can't think of one person that I have in New York right now. All of my New York people
Wow.
have been doula clients. And it's interesting that you brought
Mm-hmm.
up, you know, feeling more comfortable when you're in the office, because
Mm-hmm.
it might mean that you just feel like you can say whatever you want and it's like a different environment. So it's
Yeah.
understanding what
Yeah.
needs to happen for you to feel as comfortable as though you were in this person's office, right? But
Right.
it's, I would,
Right.
one thing that I would point out is that this isn't talk therapy. And that's
Mm-hmm.
important because talk therapy helps you to process things on a mental level, like when you can talk through them, right? And you can see the threads.
Mm-hmm.
Somatic therapy, which
Yes.
connects to the body, you're able to get deeper more quickly because, you know, information
Mm-hmm.
has to come from the body, go to the brain and be processed. The brain sometimes filters information or it might distort some information, but the body just gives you the pure information that's there, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so
Mm-hmm.
the filtering that happens with the brain doesn't happen, and so you're able to get to healing more quickly. But the other reason why it's
Mm-hmm.
important is because trauma happens in the body. And so the healing
Mm-hmm.
has to also be processed through the body, right?
Mine
And so
too.
that's why
Yeah.
things like movement and, you know, even using your voice is so important, because the trauma really is energy, right? And so you get to
Mm-hmm.
move the energy. So I've had sessions with someone who just went through really intense trauma, and there was anger
Mm-hmm.
inside of her that she couldn't access, or she didn't feel like she had the permission to access. But
Like
yeah, but I get
telepathy.
loose in my sessions. You know, I like stood up and
Mm-hmm.
I like had her stomping her feet and I was yelling with her, just like having her release that
Mm-hmm.
energy, because guess what? If you don't release it, it just stays stuck in the body, in the hips, in the gut, in the
Yeah.
chest. It stays stuck somewhere in the body because there's no expression,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's sort of like when you're really
Mm.
excited and you're just like, and you just have to let it out, like,
Yeah. Yeah. So you kind of, instead of us suppressing it, you help us to
release
let
it.
out whatever we're
Exactly.
feeling.
And with my
Mm-hmm.
clients, I support them in doing that in the way that makes sense for them, right? So, for example,
Mm-hmm.
I don't jog. I don't do any sort of like intense boot camp or any of that stuff. Power to the people who do it, but it's like not my style.
I used to, but
It's not my
it ain't my
style.
cup of
But
tea.
like
No.
I can dance all
Mm-mm.
day. Like I
Yeah.
will have a song for every single emotion. And so dancing is one of the tools that I
Yeah.
use in my healing and journaling. So it's
Uh,
like, what's your thing?
okay.
And it's using your thing for healing.
Mm-hmm.
But I think sometimes because it's so simple, we overlook it and not
Mm-hmm.
realizing that
Mm-hmm.
way back when we started in our tribes, that's what we did. We moved through shit, we moved
Mm-hmm.
stuff, right? And so it's bringing
Mm-hmm.
that back so that we get to have the healing in our bodies where the hurt occurred, right? Where the trauma is being held. And
Yeah.
so my work is just
Mm-hmm.
holding space and reminding people of the importance of doing this healing. And I would say that the reason why I'm especially passionate about my work is I believe that women and birthing people, like we are the ones who are, like we're the ones who are going to be responsible for bringing
Yeah.
in the new souls and guiding them to
Mm-hmm.
be the next leaders of the next generation. And so if we are out of balance, how do we show up for that work? So it feels
Yeah,
very much like
that's
planetary
true.
healing. Like if I can get a birthing person to feel healed and whole and
Mm-hmm.
confident in their body, then the child that they raise from that place of wholeness,
It's gonna feel the
like you've won.
yeah.
You're done.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Wow. So tell me how now. I know that you do coaching sessions. You're a birth
hmm
doula. Now, how did that translate into your podcast? When did you start your
Yeah.
podcast?
So my podcast was started last year, February, so February 2020. And I was doing
Mm-hmm.
a business coaching program, and my
Mm-hmm.
mentor kept telling me, like, I think podcasts would be great for you because you have just so much to say. And I was like, I don't know. Like I was,
She was right though. She was right. She was
yeah.
right.
So that was one of the barriers that I had to work through myself. And it's true, I have a lot to say. I
Yeah.
have a lot of opinions, and I'm good at like analyzing things and helping people to get them from a very simple perspective. And like I feel like I
Yeah.
like catch things in the universe. And,
You do because yes, because even when I was doing the podcast with you, like I just felt so like
Aw,
free. Like I was just like
yeah,
but I felt comfortable with you to just let it all out. Like I didn't feel like I had to hold certain things in. I was able to just like talk about everything about
yeah,
my
yeah. And
journey.
you almost made me cry. I feel like you definitely, yeah, yeah. I was on the verge of
I think
crying.
we both had a cry
Yes,
session. Yeah. There was a few times I was like, yeah, we had a cry
yeah,
session. We
yeah.
did. Because I was like just thinking about things, and then once I started, you know how like you start telling a
Mm-hmm,
story, and then like you forget certain things, but then as you're talking, you're like, oh wow, that happened,
mm-hmm.
and then it was like I was telling you my story, but then I was like starting to the feelings that I was feeling at that
Mm-hmm.
time was starting to come back
Yeah.
too. So it got me emotional. And normally, I mean, like I'm not really a water bag, but like now I don't know, lately I'm just like all in my
Mm-hmm.
feels, like like if I watch something on TV, they
Oh
crying, I'm
yeah.
crying. I'm
Yeah.
like, so but I love that you just bring that out in me.
Oh,
Like I'm able to just be free when I'm talking
yeah.
to you. So I love that about you. And I was saying before you came on, I was saying, you literally turn your pain into
Mm-hmm.
purpose. Like you literally, but this is your
Yeah.
calling. Like this is your calling.
Yeah.
This is your
Yeah. I'm
next.
so glad you
You
said
know,
that. There's
it is. But
yeah, there's a podcast episode that I have in mind that I haven't recorded
mhm.
yet. And the title
Uh-huh.
is going to be something around why did my baby die? Because I hear that question a lot, like,
Mhm.
was it my body? Was it what I was doing? Was it what I wasn't doing? And so I want to go through like,
Mhm.
possible things that could happen, that leads to a loss.
Yeah.
But a part of that is that we'll never know. We will never know. It will
No.
always be just left to the
Yeah.
mystery, right? Like even if you're in
Yeah.
perfect health and everything looks good, a loss might occur and you may
Yes.
never know why it happened. And
Never know why. I still don't know
exactly.
why. I still don't know why. But it's just something that I've learned to. I have to. I've learned to
Mm-hmm.
process it. I mean, of course I'm always gonna want to know
Mm-hmm.
why, but I'm never going
Yeah.
to. So I can't. But at the beginning, you beat
Mm-hmm.
yourself up. At least I know I
Mm-hmm.
did. You beat yourself up. You feel
Mm-hmm.
guilty. You feel like you did something
Mm-hmm.
wrong. Like my first thing was because my first miscarriage, I was working at a very stressful job
Yeah.
too. So I always felt like could I have done something that I have not been stressing out at work so much? And then the second pregnancy, my job wasn't as stressful, but I was stressed because I was worried that something was going to go wrong, you know? So that anxiety and that fear, it didn't go away the second pregnancy. But like you said, everybody could be saying all the right things and being so supportive, but you still feel like they don't understand because I went through this before. I don't want it to happen again. So I'm so careful about everything, your anxiety is like up to here.
Yeah, like so well said. Like so well said. And it's hard to explain it if you haven't experienced, so that's also the benefit of working with someone who's been on a similar journey, because there are things that are just understood that you don't have to say,
Yes.
Yeah,
That's true.
yeah.
There's certain things like you just you get it.
Exactly.
You get it.
Exactly.
You get it.
So I was saying that you sometimes don't know why, I think of it this way. You don't know the reason, but you can give it meaning, right? You don't know why your baby died, but you can decide that my baby's death, my baby's transition is going to mean something, right? And so I feel like I literally wrote in my diary, like in August, Mateo lives. And August was such, it was like a month that had so much flourishing for me. And it wasn't me personally, it was the clients that I was working with. So I had 3 families whose babies became one, because I was working as a birth doula for 3 different families last August, and their babies all turned one. And one of my clients was getting close to her date for giving birth, and another of my client, her pregnancy was confirmed, and things were progressing. And so it felt as though I had all of this life, like my ovaries were literally, not literally, but it felt like this was my ovaries, like like opening up into flowers, because like all of this bloom was happening around me, and it wasn't in my life, but all of the people's lives who I had touched. And as a birth doula, like once you are a part of that person's life in the birth, you will always be a part of that baby's story. Right. And so I could feel that in such a potent way, that through this work, my baby had a legacy, and my baby got to live through those families and through those babies. And so each person can decide, like, what is this pregnancy going to mean for me? Right. What is this loss going to mean for me? Like, what meaning do I want to create? Because, and that's the journey of the warrior. It's deciding, I'm not going to be broken by this. This is an experience that occurred on X date in X month. This isn't going to define the rest of my life, but how can I create beauty, right? How can I create art from this experience?
Yeah.
Wow.
One question I always ask at the end, I guess 2 questions. What advice would you give to women that are on their journey right now, trying to start a family? What advice would you give to them?
Are they having challenges, or they're just thinking of starting a family?
I think especially for people like me that are having challenges and that have been on the journey for a long time, what advice would you give to them?
Yeah. One of my podcast episodes, which was a hard one for me to record, this one was why do you want to have children? And it was a hard one, but it was an important one, because sometimes the motivation behind having children, it isn't something that comes from us, but it's something that comes from society's expectation of what and who we should be, right? And it doesn't mean that your answer at the end of the day is going to be like, oh, I guess I don't want children. It's just really important to know what your motivation is, because if it is, having children because you think your partner wants to have children, or having children because you think your partner's mother, wants to have children, then it's no longer just you on the journey, or you making the decision, but
Yeah.
you're taking in other people's perspective, but also the pressure from other people. Right. And then another
Yeah.
thing, so this is work that I've done for myself. Like I've done a deep dive into my journey and my emotions so that I can show up for my clients and create a space where they can be authentic. And so what I learned as I did
Mm-hmm.
this exploration for myself is that, and this goes back to advertising, I was working in that environment and I needed something to save me. Like I needed a reason to say,
Mm-hmm.
oh, you have to be a stay-at-home mom now because now you have a child. Because I knew that once I became pregnant, I would want to stay home. But I, within
Mm-hmm.
myself, as an unpregnant person, I didn't have the courage to just leave and just do what I wanted to do. And so I wanted the
Mm-hmm.
pregnancy to force me into making a choice.
To be your reason.
Exactly. And so
Yeah.
once you know what that reason is and you're able to go on your journey with greater awareness and confidence, and also like on your own damn pace, because there's benefit to that, to be able to live the life that you want and decide when you're ready to try again. Right? And
Yeah.
so,
And what?
no, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No,
I
go
didn't mean to
ahead, go
cut you off.
ahead.
What advice would you give to, it's, Pregnancy and Infant Loss
Hmm.
Awareness Month. What advice would you give to a woman that's experienced loss?
Yeah. It's one of the toughest things that anyone can ever go through because there is so much love that opens up in your body and for the baby when you're pregnant. And having
Mm-hmm.
gone through loss, it's
Mm-hmm.
like all of that is taken away from you without your permission before you're ready. And so it's really, really difficult. Um, and it's interesting. So for this month, I actually just sent out a newsletter today, and my recommendation in the
Mm-hmm.
newsletter was take things at your own pace and do things at your own rhythm, right? So it is
Yes.
Pregnancy and Infant Loss Awareness Month. If you don't have the capacity to process and to honor your baby, like don't feel pressure to do that.
To
Right.
do it.
But
Yeah.
however, if you're
Mm-hmm.
feeling that there's a lot that you're holding and you don't have the space to process that, you might want to get support to do
Mm-hmm.
that. Right. So it's tuning into what's happening in your body and finding the support
Mm-hmm.
to, do the healing, or deciding that, you know what, that's not going to happen today. Today, I'm just going to chill. I'm not thinking about that because I don't have the capacity to do that. So it's giving
To
grace
deal with it.
and having courage all at the same time and deciding which one is appropriate for the situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that.
Thank you for listening to the episode. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. I hope that this provided a bit more background about who I am, why I love working with birth warriors, who birth warriors are, and why I am committed to your healing, to your journey, to you finding wholeness in your life. If you find that you'd like some more support, hit me up. I am on Instagram at the birth warriors, all one word. My email is hello@nataliefacey.com. So that's NATALEEFACEY.com. And you'll find that information in the show notes. And there's a program that I'm running right now called Rebirth. Rebirth kicked off in November and is just a beautiful space for birth warriors to get support in their healing. And the next cohort will likely launch in early 2022. The years are weird now. So be on the lookout for additional information about when Rebirth will be launching again, when we'll have our second cohort. I would love, love, love to have you in the group with us. And if you'd like one-to-one support, that's an option as well. Just hit me up, send me an email, or find the link on my website to book a complimentary consultation call, and I can share tools and tips with you and any resources that might be supportive for your journey, for your healing, for your pregnancy after loss or infertility. All right, have a wonderful rest of the week, and I'm sending you so much love. Bye.